Okay, but what I really want to say is we all know that when you're first studying a language, you're not going to understand everything. That's obvious, but most of you here are at a pretty high level in your English language. I mean, I'm speaking 100% in English. I speak quickly, so if you're here and you're understanding, your English is at a really great level, okay? And it's frustrating, right? When you understand me, but then you don't understand other people, and you're like, what's wrong with me? Something must be wrong with me. No, nothing is wrong with you. I am here to tell you that it's probably not even your fault, okay? And I'm going to explain why it's not your fault, and that a lot of times native English speakers are to blame when you don't understand them, or no one's to blame, but it's definitely not your fault. Okay, so reason number one, why you might not understand a native English speaker. Maybe they have really, really bad speaking habits. They mumble, they speak too quickly, they don't enunciate. That's not your fault for not understanding them. If I hear a person speak like that, I might be like, whoa, what are they saying? And I'm a native English speaker. Now, granted, I might be able to understand a little bit better than you because I have more experience with this language. But in general, when people don't enunciate, okay, when they are mumbling, when they're speaking too quietly, I have to be like, what? Excuse me, can you speak up, please? I don't understand you. So it's not your fault when people do this. It's their fault, okay? For having bad speaking habits. Now, a quick story about this, because I can totally relate to you guys on this. I was in Argentina. For those of you who don't know, I lived there for 6 years. My husband is from Argentina. We were over there. We were at an asado, which is a barbecue, with his friends. And he had a friend there who was speaking so fast. And I was like listening intently, trying to understand what he was saying. And my brain was hurting because I was like working so hard just to understand this guy. And I started feeling really bad. I was like, man, you know, I've been living in Argentina for 6 years. I speak Spanish. Apparently I don't speak it well, or I don't understand well. Something must be wrong with me because I don't understand this guy. And I just started beating myself up for not understanding him. And then the next day I told Ren about it. And I was like, you know what? I've been feeling really bad ever since the barbecue with your friend. I was like, I just didn't understand like almost anything he said. I had to work really hard to understand him, and he speaks so fast. And you know what Ren said? He was like, that's fine. Nobody understands him. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? He's like, no, nobody understands him. We don't know what he says half the time that he's talking. He speaks way too fast, and he has really bad speaking habits. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me right now. So I was beating myself up like something was wrong with me. And nothing was wrong with me or my Spanish or anything. It's that guy that has bad speaking habits. So it's really unfortunate because language is a way to communicate. And if we're not communicating well, nobody's going to understand us. And that kind of defeats the purpose of language, which is for communication. So anyways, you need to be able to recognize bad speaking habits in your native language and in other languages so that you can realize when you don't understand somebody, what it's because of. Are you unfamiliar with their accent? Is it because they simply have bad speaking habits? What is it because of? Because if you can identify what it's because of, then you'll realize that you're not to blame 99.9% of the time. And that's good, because if not, you're going to be way too hard on yourself, and that's not necessary. You don't need that kind of pressure. Oh, and quick story about the different accents thing. I was in a grocery store one time in Bariloche in Argentina, and I hear these people speaking this foreign language, and I was like, wow, that sounds so cool. And I was like, Ren, what language do you think they're speaking? And he's like, are you kidding me? That's Chilean Spanish. I was like, what? So it was Spanish, and I speak Spanish. I am a fluent Spanish speaker. And people from Chile, which is like across the border, right? It's just Argentina's here and Chile is right next to it. Their Spanish apparently is so different. I didn't even recognize it. I didn't even know it was Spanish. Okay, so That's not my fault. It's not my fault that I didn't understand them. They speak a dialect that I never heard in my life and I'm completely unfamiliar with. And they were probably speaking very quickly. You know, they were people my age, so maybe they were using a lot of slang. I don't know. So I think I made my point there. Let's move on. Okay, sometimes when native speakers are speaking, you will understand all the words that they say, but you won't understand the meaning. That's probably not your fault. For example, my friend Pete from Aussie English, we were on the phone a few months ago and he was just like, yeah, mate, I was taking the piss out of myself lately. And I was like, ew, what? Taking the piss out of yourself? I didn't even know what that meant. And you know what? I don't remember what it means. So I'm going to have to go look it up now, but it means something apparently in Australian English. It's an idiom, right? And this is why idiomatic expressions are so difficult, because if you're not familiar with that idiomatic expression, you'll have no idea. It's like the person is speaking another language. They're saying it all in English, but you're like, I have no idea what you just said. Okay? So again, that phrase, taking the piss out of myself lately or whatever, I did not know what that meant. And I still don't know what it means. I forgot. He told me, but I forgot. So I will look that up. And if you want to know, I guess you can look it up too. Or I will, you know what? I'll put it in the description. That way we all have it. So again, sometimes you're going to understand all the words that you hear, but you're not going to understand the meaning because it might be an idiomatic expression that you're unfamiliar with. Okay, the next reason why you might not understand native English speakers sometimes is because you have zero interest in a conversation. This happens to me all the time in Spanish, actually more frequently than I want to admit. And it's involuntary, it's not my fault. My brain does this and I wish it wouldn't. But for example, if I'm at the dinner table and everyone's talking about something that is really technical and I just don't feel like thinking about what they're saying and making sense of it. And I get lost or something in the conversation. All of a sudden, my brain shuts off. I start thinking about something entirely different. And then in a few seconds or a minute, however long it takes me, I come back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was listening. I was hearing everything people were saying, but it's like my brain wasn't there. And my family in Argentina, or Ren's family, they know that this happens to me all the time. So they just refer to it as Stephanie land. They're like, oh, Stephanie, come back. You're in Stephanie land again. They can see it in my eyes just glaze over. But this happens to me. It's if I have zero interest in a conversation, or that even seems or sounds kind of rude to say, but if my brain determines that the conversation is not important to me, then I just zone out and it's involuntary. I try to control it, but a lot of times it happens to me. If this happens to you, you're not alone. Let me know if it happens to you actually in the comments. That way I know that I'm not alone. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes I don't understand things in Spanish, just because I'm not even paying attention. Again, it's involuntary, okay? I'm not being rude, oh, I'm not gonna pay attention. It happens to me. Okay, next. Another reason why you might not understand native English speakers is because the language they use is not clear. It's convoluted and it's confusing. This happens so often and it's unfortunate. But for example, sometimes people struggle to communicate abstract ideas, or if it's a vague concept that they haven't fully developed in their own mind, then yeah, they're going to struggle to communicate that because they don't even really know what they think. So it's hard to communicate exactly what they think because they don't know exactly what they think. Other times people speak in riddles or they don't say what they mean. They just sort of allude to something or imply something and you're left okay, what? What are you trying to say? Or what are you saying? This even happens to me when I'm talking with people. If they're not being clear, I have to bring that to their attention and say, okay, I'm sorry, this isn't clear. Can you please explain what you mean? Okay. Again, not your fault. It's not your fault for not understanding when someone else is being unclear and using convoluted language. Also, recently, one of my friends who is Russian and she immigrated to the USA, I think 20 years ago or something, she was really struggling with a document from work that was written all in English. It was these emails that people were writing back and forth to each other. They had a problem. Her job was to read through the emails, figure out the problem, solve the problem, get back to them, etc. And she could not figure out what they were talking about. So she asked me for help. I read the emails and I was just oh my gosh, the way these people are writing. Yeah, they're native English speakers. Yeah, it's English, but it's so confusing the way that they're writing, I didn't even understand it. And it's like when people try to write in this formal way, but it's like overdone to the point where it no longer makes sense. It's just like, oh, you could have said this so much simpler. Or instead of saying what something is, they say what something isn't. This is something I learned in my English class a long time ago in high school, right? It's better to say what something is than what something isn't. For example, if someone says, it's not that I don't understand what happened, it's just that XYZ. Instead of saying, it's not that I don't understand what happened, which is super confusing, you could just say, I understand what happened. However, do you see how that is so much more like, it's so much easier to understand? Yes, because it's clear. It's not convoluted. It's not like a double negative in a sentence, right? Some people have very, very bad communication habits, unfortunately. But again, the point of this video is to remind you that it's not always your fault, okay? And when you can understand what the heck is going on around you, it makes it a lot easier to be confident, to feel in control, and feel like it's not your fault and you're okay. It's not your problem. Okay, speaking of it's not your fault and it's not your problem, one of the other reasons why you might not understand native English speakers is because you were never taught how people speak in real life. In whatever course you did or class you did, lessons you did, whatever it is, you were probably not taught the way people speak in real life. You were not introduced to fast speech or connected speech or anything like that, okay? And that is a huge problem because you become very confident in your English class. Maybe you're the best student and you're like, yeah, I get the best grades. I'm able to answer the teacher's questions. This is awesome. And then you go into the real world and you're like, oh my gosh. And you have this rude awakening and you're like, oh, okay, nobody actually talks the way I was taught in class. I know, because the same thing happened to me. I studied Spanish in high school in immersion programs. I studied it in college. You guys, I know. The same exact thing happened to me. It's not our fault. I wish that all language institutions would kind of get with the program and really teach more modern language. But whatever. If they're not going to do it, then we have to pick up the slack and make it happen for ourselves, right? Be independent, proactive learners. Okay, and the last reason that I'll cover in this video of why you might not understand native English speakers, it could be related to anxiety, right? If you have a lot of anxiety when it comes to speaking, having conversations, interacting with native speakers, then your brain can just go into survival mode and you're like, oh my gosh, and you can't focus on anything. You're not relaxed, and this anxiety makes it a lot more difficult for you to communicate.